What's going on, y'all? I'm stoked to share that I finally upgraded my GPU, although my wallet is not as stoked. I purchased a used Asus TUF 3080 from eBay. In this video, I'll show the installation of the card, along with two Noctua fans. I'll also compare the 3080 with a few benchmarks I posted previously with my 1060. Let's get started. The card appeared to be in good shape, but it was fairly dusty when I received it. According to the eBay seller, it was in a home theater PC, so I'm hoping that means it was lightly used. But you never truly know when buying from a stranger online. I used the microfiber cloth to wipe down the fan blades, and compressed air outside to blow the remaining dust away. Each fan is secured with 3 screws. One annoying thing to note here is that in order to replace the fans, if you ever needed to, you have to remove the shroud, which is another 6 screws. It's not the end of the world, but since the fans are the most likely part for a user to replace, I'd like to see improved accessibility. Surprisingly, the backplate still had the adhesive film. And a final wipe down before it goes into the case. I purchased two 120mm by 15mm Noctua fans. So they're a little more slim because I wanted to make sure there was enough clearance for the GPU. Just like the other Noctua fans in my case, these are the Chromax Black Swap version, which include a variety of different colored anti-vibration pads. In order to install the new fans, I had to purchase the Noctua Y splitter cables. I'll pair the bottom 2 fans together for one splitter, and the front and back fans together on a second splitter. It was also necessary to pick up the 4-pin extension cables. Without these, the cables from the bottom fans will not reach the splitter cables at the top of the motherboard. I considered removing the CPU cooler, but I was able to maneuver around it. The left fan header is for the CPU, the middle is for an AIO pump, and the right is for chassis fans. The AIO pump header defaults to 100% fan speeds, but you can change this in the BIOS or in the Asus AI Suite software. Moving on to installing the fans, I'm configuring them so they're pulling fresh air from the bottom and exhausting directly into the GPU. Unlike the thicker 24mm Noctua fans, these anti-vibration pads are applied with the adhesive film on the back. I don't plan on swapping the pads, so I don't mind it, but I could see how it could be annoying for some. Finally installing the GPU, I was a little concerned that it would not fit. I wasn't able to capture it because my head was obstructing the view, but I was barely able to squeeze it in. The 3080 is huge compared to the 1060, and I'm glad I went with the slimmer fans, otherwise I don't think there would be enough clearance for the GPU. Moving on to the backside, we're using the 4-pin extension cables to connect the bottom fans to the Y cables. I think I did a pretty good job back here of tidying the cables. I'm also glad I used an extended Corsair CPU power cable to route through the back, because it left enough room to easily install the Y cables. Although the 3080 fit, it was sagging too much to the point where the chassis fans were interfering with the GPU fans. This is a little jank, but I made a shim from an old leather iPhone case to place in between the GPU and the chassis fans. If I had a 3D printer, that would have been a better option, but this ended up working out pretty well. Moving on to comparing the benchmarks from before with the 1060 and after with the 3080. Of course, it isn't really a fair comparison. It's really more about showing the performance gains from the upgrade. All of the games were tested with their in-game benchmarking tool. Starting off with Watch Dogs Legion at 1080p. On low, medium, and ultra, we see excellent performance gains. And at ultra, we see nearly 3 times the performance. On low graphics, the system temperatures were surprisingly lower with the 3080. Since these benchmarks were not performed on the same day, there is a variance with the ambient room temperature. And another variable to consider is that the bottom fans were absent with the 1060. So these little experiments aren't perfect, but I still think it does a decent job at representing real-world use. We see similar performance gains with Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 1080p. The system temperatures on high graphics were also lower with the 3080 installed. Again, this is likely because the ambient room temperatures varying when the measurements were recorded, along with the bottom fans only present with the 3080. The same narrative continues with Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1080p. We see nearly the same performance gains from the previous two games, as well as lower temperatures again with a 3080, even though it's drawing way more power than the 1060. Next, I'll show some screen capture clips from the 4K benchmarks I took with all three games. We'll start with Watch Dogs Legion at low, Assassin's Creed Valhalla at high, and lastly Red Dead Redemption 2 on ultra. I didn't make charts here to compare because I didn't take benchmarks with the 1060, considering that's not what it was designed for. I would expect it to run pretty poorly. Overall, I'm ecstatic about the performance gains the 3080 provides. I didn't run the application benchmarks I posted previously in the 1060 benchmark video because those application benchmarks are really a measurement of the CPU performance and not the GPU. So if you're interested in those, check out that video. My next project is to replace the thermal pads on the 3080 to achieve better VRAM temperatures during mining. Be sure to check it out. Thanks for sticking around, y'all. I'll see you in the next video.